historians amongst us, Michael and John Plunkett and many other historians here this year. But I am just amazed at how much they know about our tradition. I'm not a historian, right? But what she said she wanted me to talk about was just what singing was like when I was little. And that's history. That's a long time ago. I'm 73. I was born in 1938. And I don't see how you can talk about singing in isolation. To get a feel for the way we sang and what we did, you sort of have to remember what the world was like when I was little. And I don't mean the political world that you read about in history books. I mean the local world, Newton County, Mississippi, where I live, what it was like around here. And so my earliest memories were during the war. Yes. And well, a lot of the young men were all in the war, virtually all of them. We have a book now, World War II veterans from Newton County, and it's about that big. And everybody that I know that was in that age group from that county was in that book. They were in World War II. So that was one thing that was different. And there was rationing. You couldn't buy things. You had to have stamps to get sugar because the sugar was going to the war effort. And you had to have coupons to buy gasoline or parts for an automobile. Now that didn't bother my family because we didn't have anything that used gasoline. We didn't have a car, tractor, or any motorized vehicle of any sort. We also didn't have electricity. The kind of petroleum product we used was kerosene. We used kerosene for lights at night. But so that's another thing that was different then was, and I don't want to sound like I'm complaining about my childhood. I don't know anybody, I really don't know anybody that had a better childhood than I did. I mean, life was wonderful. But it was without money. And some of the things we take for granted, we didn't have. And, you know, I am amazed, I am just blown away by the level of prosperity we have now in terms of things, the things that we have now. We didn't have telephone, electricity. I remember when one of my first cousins, who was in the Army, when he came home, he loved my dad. They bird hunted together, and so he had gotten a radio, a battery-powered radio, and he brought it to my dad. He could help the war effort. We didn't have a radio, and so it was a big old battery, bigger than a car battery, like a big old tractor battery. Put up a wire, an aerial, so we could pick up the radio at night. We didn't listen to music on the radio, we listened to the news on the radio. So our connection to music was, I mean, the idea, CD, no, record, no. We didn't have a record player, we wouldn't have a record without a record player. So we didn't have a radio, and even when we got home, we didn't listen to music on the radio. Our music was the music that was produced there. My mother sang in the kitchen, and so some of these songs I learned a year ago when her singing in the kitchen. And we sang at church from the good old songs. We were primitive Baptist, and if you're not familiar with the good old songs, he really did collect what you'd call the good old songs. Most of the old songs that we sing from the Christian Harmony or from the Sacred Heart, those tunes are in Case's book, the good old songs. The reason for collecting them was that a lot of the text in the Sacred Heart and the Christian Harmony are contrary to what primitive Baptists believe. And so he collected the music and put text that he thought appropriate. And I believe this came out in 1926. And I don't believe it has been revised since. It's still in use. You can still buy copies, new copies, but it has not been revised. It's just been reprinted. So our connection with music was entirely different than young people's connection now. We sang at home, and one thing, we sang in the fields. We were farmers, and we'd be out hoeing cotton, and in the middle of the day, you didn't sing. But when the sun began to go down, it was not uncommon for people to start singing, and that's wonderful, by the way. It's a different sign when people are out on the field and they're all scattered around, and somebody just starts singing. And, so we did that, and we had other music. My dad was a fiddle player. He was a good country fiddle player. One of the only things I ever did in my life was get away from Coney Creek without learning to play the fiddle. But he had trouble teaching me because he had the gift, and he didn't understand. He literally didn't understand why it sounded so terrible when I pulled it. He didn't understand. Because his older sister said when he got food, it never sounded bad. Said, he bought the fiddle. He was off somewhere down south of Newton, which would have been about 10 or 12 miles from his home. And there was somebody had a fiddle that needed some repair, and he bought it, and now he was riding a wagon. And 10 miles on a wagon, that's a while. I don't mean a buggy where the horses run. I'm talking about a wagon that you use to haul things. And so he's sitting there on, so a wagon would have a little body, and if it's a work wagon, it wouldn't have a spring seat. It would have a board going across. You sit on that board. And so, he sat on that board riding home and played with that fiddle. And they all said when he got home, he could play the key. And so he didn't understand why, when I pulled across the string, it just, and so I didn't learn to play the fiddle, and that's one of my great regrets from when I grew up. Let's see, you were asking about people that took band in high school, had music classes in high school. Where I went to school, we didn't have a band. We didn't have enough guys for a football team. I can still name all the people in my graduating class. And we didn't have music classes either. And so our connection with music was in the home. It was absolutely devoid, no connection in the school. Well, that's not quite right, because even in school, we'd sing sometimes. And we were talking just last night about what they now call convention music, the Stamps Baxter music. And there was a lot of that in the county. And well, my first singing school was from a Stamps Baxter tradition. But back to what life was like. You had the war, and you couldn't get things. And one of the things that I remember about the 40s was polio. Yes. One of the reasons I remember it, I had it, and polio, you were scared to death of polio. Yes. Back in the 80s, we had this great fear of AIDS, and people were scared to death to be around people with AIDS because they thought they'd catch it. AIDS, that wasn't very likely, but polio, we thought was highly contagious. We were scared to death of polio. And I got polio, and my parents, my dad went with me to Vicksburg for treatment. And my mother and my sister stayed at home, and we were out in the country on the farm, but the health department came out and put up a quarantine sign. You couldn't go to our house to visit, because they were so afraid that one of them had polio, and that they would, of course, one of her brothers came anyway, but they didn't know about that. But, I contracted polio in August of 1949. And it was during my first singing school. See, if I just hadn't gotten polio, I might have learned. But Wednesday afternoon, my mother asked me, after the singing school, my mother asked me why I was limping. And I insisted I was not limping. Thursday afternoon, I would agree I was limping, but it did not hurt. But they took me to the hospital anyway. Friday afternoon, well, I was hurting Friday afternoon. Saturday afternoon, they were taking me to Vicksburg to the hospital that specialized in treating polio victims. And by then I couldn't sit up by myself. I mean, it was coming on my shoulders.
How old were you by then?
And so, I often thought my mother had not noticed that until I would have noticed it, which would have been Friday. That was 2 days later. If I had had 2 more days of that before I got treatment, probably would have been critical. But anyway, that had nothing to do with singing, except that I didn't get full singing school. But so that was from the satisfaction book, and we would go to the little book singing. We call them little book singing. They sometimes not call convention singings. But we get new books every year, and it's a little impressive that the people would come in, they'd open the book up, somebody called for a number, and the girl had never seen the book before, and she'd play the song, and the whole class would sing. I thought it was fairly impressive how well they would do with books they'd never seen before. But we did that, but we also Christian party singing there in the county. But a big change from nowadays is how many singings we had. You only went to singings that were close by, especially if you didn't have a car. If you go to get on a wagon and go to a singing, if that singing is 10 miles away, that's like getting in your car and moving a long way, except that car is air conditioned. And when I taught mathematics, and I learned that in a math class, it's some limited time that students will concentrate, and once you pass that time, you may as well stop and tell the jokes. I was famous for absolutely horrible jokes. I had no standards at all, because the point wasn't the joke. The point was to break the teeth. So I'm going to tell the joke about riding on a wagon. The language changes. When I was a kid, we had this expression for highly egotistical people. He had the gnat on the coupling pole complex. Gnat on the coupling pole complex. Does that make sense to you? You ride on a wagon, these were not buggies, these were work wagons. And just a body on it to hold stuff. But so you have a front axle, and you have a back axle, and you have a beam that goes between them. That's called a coupling pole.
Right.
Kids love to sit on the coupling pole. I don't know why it's rough, it's just about as your. But kids love to drive that coupling pole looking back. And so whenever you're going along, you're walking on. When the team strikes up a trot, they just make a terrible dust. They're banging around on the wagon. And the gnat on the coupling pole looks back and says, "Man, look what that dust I do raise."
Are these pulled by mules or horses?
Yeah,
or?
mules or horses.
Okay.
And when I was 3 or 4, I guess, the one we would have ridden in was a mule and a horse. Mule and a horse. But you didn't go 20 miles to a sing on a wagon. It's just too far to go. And my mother lived right next to Macedonian church, and inside of the church. And she used to tell about when people would come from other counties to the convention at Macedonia. It was mostly the men that would come on horseback, and they would come the day before and spend the weekend with people that lived nearby, and they lived nearby the more nearby than anybody, so they would always have this crowd and this, and so it was a big feast, really, because they had to produce a lot of food. So the singing, was more local people, but no people from out of state. I mean, goodness, it'd take you forever to come from out of that. But around 1950, 51, 52, the war was over and people were getting cars and there was more traveling around. And so I well remember the county convention in 1952. That was the first time that the people from North Mississippi came down to our Christian Harmony convention. You, Bill McGuire, and S.P. Hawkins, and Hill Rome. And so then people began to come, and then a couple of years later, just blew my mind. A carload of people from Texas came there. I wish I knew their names, because I'm sure that Robert would know who it was, but I don't know exactly where they came from. But, okay, so the singing were more local, because we just didn't have people from a long way off. And it had the influence of the New Book singings. And another difference with the Christian Harmony community, it's beginning to change now, but when we got to Georgia, there were two communities. There was the Sacred Heart community, and there was the Christian Harmony community. We didn't experience that. We had one group of Shake Note singers. Well, we had two groups of Shake Note singers. There was the Stamps Baxter people, and there were the Oblong Book people. The Sacred Heart singers were the same as the Christian Harmony singers. In our county, the book was the Christian Harmony. If we went north, the primary book was the Denson Sacred Heart book. If we went south, the primary book was the Cooper Sacred Heart book. And so it was more one community, and so we didn't think different songs, different things. They were all the same to us.
Did the Stamps Baxter singers still sing the shapes in those days?
It depends. You know, of course they play the piano. And so when they're playing the piano, they tend to use the piano to give them the tune. But occasionally, normally not, but occasionally they get us on a song that we're having problems with as they sing the shapes. But the singing schools, definitely we sang the shapes. We were taught to sing by the shapes. And I think that's still the case. I talked to a guy, I don't know, 10 years ago, who actually taught one of those schools, and I think they still teach them about the same way. Another book that we used, in church, was the Good Old Song. And that was the same music. We view that as the same music. Well, you asked me about Beach Spring. Yeah, I was saying Christian Harmony. I don't remember singing it. It's in there.
Mm-hmm.
What is it? 213, I think. And so I'm sure we sang it, but I think it was in what it is.
213.
Yes.
Come ye Christians, be committed to the service of the
Yeah,
Lord.
the same tune though.
Yes.
But we sang the same music at church. We sang Christian Harmony singing, or Sacred Heart singing. We sang, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 singings a year. And of course they were saying then that the singing was dying out, all the singers were dying out, and this wouldn't last a few more years. And that was probably right, because we didn't have books. The Decent Parish book came out in 1958. And so I remember my uncle was the president of the county convention. Now each of my parents had a book that they got when they were young. My mother was born in 1901. My dad was born in 1894. And a lot of the Christian harmonies were printed in 1901. The 1873 book was reprinted in 1901, so there were a lot of those books around, and they each had one. And one of the prominent singing families was the Rigdon family. They were all terrific singers. Both parents and the 8 children were all terrific singers. I mean, really good. Clifton Rigdon had it probably as good a tenor voice as I've ever heard. He was just an old country guy, no education, didn't know much music. But when he opened his mouth, you wanted to hear it. I mean, he just sounded good. That family was just a singing family. They had 2 books.
Mm-hmm.
They had 2 books. The father's book and the mother's book. And Mr. Wilson's book and Miss Hatch's book. They were the age of my dad, or slightly older. And they had books. But the children didn't have books. And we have a picture from 1956 of the family, all of them getting up to leave at Liberty. And I was there. I remember the picture being made, and I looked at the picture and I noticed that between the 8 of them that were up there, Mr. Wilson had died by then, and one of them wasn't there. I think there were 8 of them there that day. There were just 2 books. That's all they had. And so that's another thing, difference. We didn't have books. You know, I remember when, okay, so we had, in my family, we had my dad's Christian Harmony and my mother's Christian Harmony. That was all the songbooks we had. Okay. That was all the songbooks we had. I remember when my mother got a copy of the Sacred Heart. It was called Mother's Book. That was Mother's Book. It was a couple book. Paper was awful. Paper was just terrible. I had it. And it's just, fragile paper. And I think that may have been 1950 that Mother got her book. But books were scarce. And so when I began trying to sing, my uncle got me a book. Oh, man. That was a big deal. It was a big deal. And the 1952 convention, I remember that because, well, one of my cousins was there. Angie she and Elsa were friends. And we sat together and sang. Angie didn't have a book. And I don't remember who was sitting on the other side of me. But I was sitting here, Angie was there, and somebody was here, and I don't remember who it was. It was another one of the younger people. So all 3 of us were singing from the same book because we didn't have books. So that's a big change nowadays. Everybody has a book. They think they've got a problem with they sing a song and they have to look on somebody else's book. We would sing 3 to the book. And it was about that time that my uncle discovered that I was willing to go anywhere. He was willing. He didn't like to travel by himself. And I was 14 that summer. And so he would come pick me up and we would go off to Saints. And we'd go up to Calhoun County, which was just forever and a day. It was 100 miles from where we lived to those Calhoun County. And we just thought we were going out of the world. We would, so certainly we were going places I'd never been. And frequently we were going places he'd never been either. And another thing that was different, we didn't have Google Maps. We didn't have Rand McNally maps either. We didn't have maps. So, sort of hard to find where the song is. So we would go up and even know about where it was. And we'd get there early. And so we'd be tooting along and he'd just go over the side of the road. And we'd wait till the carload of singers went by. All of them. Now, when I had told that story at home more than once. And I think they didn't really believe it. But we were, when Randy and Angela were teenagers, we were going to Oak Grove, north of Alpharetta. You know where that is? It's sort of hard to find. And we were lost. And so we were tooting along about 25 miles an hour trying to think of a strategy singers. Caught up with them, I followed them, and they got up this crossroads, and the bull was here.
Yeah.
And so they come up here and they stopped, the stop sign there. They went on through and boy, Randy and Angela they thought that was the funniest thing they ever heard. They went, we could see the church, we could get where it was then. And they weren't going to the singing after all. I got on my horn and I blew my horn and they looked back and I pointed and they turned around. Of course they were singing. You can tell them all they were singing.
How can you tell?
Right?
How can you
I
tell?
don't know. You pay attention when you go there singing. If carload of singers go by, you know they're singing. Then I don't know. I don't know. I had that happen another time over in Mississippi. We were going to Macedonia for the convention. It was the year the Sacred Heart Convention was at Macedonia. And we were coming out of Newton and I know, and my sister was with me. And this other church, Pine Bluff Baptist Church, is on the way. And as I was going by, there was a car parked there. And they looked like singers. So I beat my horn. They came on around and went to Macedonia. But, you know, I didn't know either one of them. But it was there that they were singing. It turned out that you know, all of you, most of you know both of them. One of them was, who was it? Sharona Nelson. Is that right? Is that her name? Yeah. And Paula McGrath.
Yeah.
And at that time, I didn't know either of them, but they were going to Mississippi State.
I can't imagine Paula being lost.
Well, she was on the right road. She just, you know, so she's on the right road, and there's this little country church, I guess, and we were early. I guess she just figured that's where it was. But it wasn't. She was about 3 miles away. Anybody have anything to say or questions?
How has the singing changed?
Yeah.
The style of singing.
Well, okay, one change was, we tended to lead 2 at a time. People had leading partners. My leading partner was Benny Rigdon. He was older than me, but there were sort of pairs of people that led. That was to get you around so that everybody got a chance to lead. So that's one change. And so there was a huge change in 1958 when we got the new book. And began singing all the Roy Parish songs and decent songs. But if you go back before that, the churches were fuller. And I'm amazed now, and the only people singing the music were people that grew up singing. We didn't have people that were disciplined, trained musicians. I mean, some of the people could really sing. I mean, as I said, Clifton Ribbon has good a voice as I would know. I mean, it was really good. Some of them were really good singers. But, and a few of them, their knowledge of music was what you learned at singing schools. You know, my uncle, he could pick up a book and open it up and he could sing. He could sing whatever he had to. But now if he had to explain it all to you, that was different. None of them were trained musicians. I didn't know anybody that sang this music that I would call a trained musician. Yes.
Did the Decent Paris revision, because it brought in all those songs that you could almost say a lot of those songs are convention book songs.
Yes, sure.
Did that bring in the other community? Did convention book singers start coming to your singing stuff?
I'm trying to think of one of them that did. I don't think of anybody.
Did your community go to the convention book singings?
I did. Christian Harmony Singers as a group, not so much, but my family did. And after a while, we were going to both, and after a while, Christian Harmony was just a lot more interesting to me, and I just quit.
Really?
That all sounded the same to me, and I quit. But when I was 12, 13, 14, I guess it was about when I was about 14, I just quit it. It got boring to me. But for 2 or 3 years there, I was certainly a regular.
Did they have Christian Harmony singing schools with the Decent Paris book after the Decent Paris book came out to teach people the new songs?
Probably. See, when the Decent Parish book came out, I was 20 years old. Now, so I was 2 years out of high school and I had gone to this junior college that was right at Decatur for those 2 years. But the year that the Decent Parish book came out, I went away to college. And what happened then, I would go back for singings. And I think they did. I think they had, well, they certainly had little groups that would get together to learn these songs. Now, Benny sponsored that. Benny would come back and try to teach them these songs. But formal singing school, I don't remember one. They probably had, but I don't remember.
Did you meet O.A. Paris at any time?
Yes. I mean, I don't really remember having a conversation with him, but I had to have. I mean, we went to the same singings. We would go to by the time that came out, Uncle Village was traveling some, and we would go over to the Alabama State Convention, Christian Harmony Convention. And then it was at Pleasant Hill, north of Tuscaloosa, as I recall. I wouldn't know how to get there, but I remember that's where we went, and where John Deason is buried, and of course he was there. And I remember, I'm pretty sure he came to Macedonia one time. I sort of have this vague memory of him being in Macedonia, but literally I remember him shaking his hand, no, but I had to.
Do you remember how he led?
No.
Anything characteristic? Okay.
Now, I have vivid memories of John Deason, how he led and had conversation with him. I mean, I would say I knew John Deason, but I think it's a little bit of a stretch to say that I knew O.A. Parrish. I probably did at the time, but I don't remember any conversation that I had with O.A. Parrish.
Can you talk all about how John Deason led and what he was like?
Mike and I can talk this later this afternoon about, should be careful what I say here, about vision, and some discussion was made about how many people get to vote on things, and somebody said, well, only 2 people got to vote on the 58th division. I said, yeah, Parrish may have had a vote. John Deason was an outgoing, I don't want to use aggressive in a negative sense. Certainly, I don't experience that. I did not experience that. But he was a forceful personality, and that showed up in his singing. If you didn't do it right, he would tell you why you weren't doing it right.
He was the Marcus Cagle of the Christian Harmony world.
I don't think I ever met Marcus Cagle. Now, I don't think I did meet Marcus Cagle. O.A. Parrish certainly I did. We were at the same singing club when I was there. And Benny and Pat and Parrish and his wife were very close friends. My leading partner, Benny. So sure I met him. I'm confident that I don't remember. Deason, on the other hand, I remember Deason vividly. And Parrish was, he had this, he was doing this revision in 1954. He was going to put it in shape of the good old songs that were already in hymn book, but still full staff music. And those actually appeared with some of those songs. I don't have a copy of that. I don't know that I ever saw a copy, but I do have loose leaves of that. And I believe what happened was he came over to discuss it with my uncle, and left copies of that with him. And what I know is that my uncle said this one, he wanted to talk over it. And so Parrish was thinking about the division. Deason was the one that came over and sort of politic for the book, and negotiated with local village about things he wanted. And Benny, by that time, but I guess it was 56, that Benny took a job in Alabama, and married a Pat Deason. So Benny now, has this in, he's talking with the Deason. Pat's father was Jewel Deason, who was not a brother to John, but he's a first cousin. So he was in the family now. And so Benny had input into what was in the Deason parish book. And I believe that Benny is responsible for those D.L. White songs. Because we would go to North Mississippi, and when nearly every time, I shouldn't say every time because it's not anything that we always do, but frequently up there, somebody would get up and call for one of those D.L. White songs. And I racked my brain about this. I think there were 4 copies of that book at the same. I know that Miss Doshi Ernest had one. I know that Boyd Adams had one. I'm pretty sure that Bernie Simbert had one. And I can't for the life of me remember who had the other book. But they called for that song, and then people would be stretching their heads over trying to see the song. Maybe 5 or 6, maybe 8 people trying to sing from the same book. And so though this wasn't those songs that Benny liked, he lobbied to get to put in the Christian Harmony. And one that he and I led a lot was Alone. And we get up to lead together, and he loved that song, and I led that a bunch of times. And I didn't quite get it. And before I figured out that Benny was right, that harmony is really nice. I really like that song. But first 10 times I led it, I guess. So, yes.
I was wondering how the singing compared, at the singings compared to in the church, the Primitive Baptist Church.
Well, in my particular Primitive Baptist church, there were half a dozen good singers. And then there was the church congregation, and they all sang, but they didn't read music very well. They sang, and it would sound good, provided we were singing a song they knew. And there were times when the singing at Macedonia on church Sunday was really, really good. But that depended on singing a song that the rest of the class knew. But as I said, we'd sing about the same song.
Did you sing in harmony in church?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. At Macedonia we did. Now some Primitive Baptist churches they did, but at Macedonia we sang. It was pretty good.
With the singings that you were going to as a child, was there a time when women weren't allowed to lead or didn't lead like you mentioned?
No,
That's only,
there's this, pardon?
it's only in Kentucky.
Well, yeah, where I grew up, people talk about whether women were allowed to lead. Miss Doshi was ancient. Miss Doshi was an old woman when I started singing. She may have been as old as I am now. I just can't imagine that she went to a singing when she was your age and didn't leave. I mean, she was a Miss Doshi.
I can remember in Alabama, the first singing for the First Lady led.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, certainly I don't remember the first time it happened.
The men only, they did 15 minutes.
Well, now, see, by the time I came along, we were past that 15 minutes. We had a certain number of songs and you could count it. I've heard them talk about it. You had a certain amount of time, but by the time I started going to the singing, that wasn't the way they did it. And I had a first cousin that was born in 1914, and I'm sure she led when she was a little girl. So I'm not familiar with that.
So what would you lead, 3 in a row or something?
Normally not 3, either 1 or 2. And see, there'd be 2 people. There was an inclination to do 2, so that Benny got to choose a song and I got to choose a song. But we didn't normally lead more than 1.
How did you actually lead together? I mean, if you chose a song, everybody's, you're beating time, or you're both beating time, you're both facing in the same direction? Okay, just curious.
Well, sometimes if it were a fugue tune, maybe one person is going to bring the bass in, and the other person maybe bring the other parts in. But yeah, we knew each other.
Yeah,
I mean,
it was sort of teamwork.
oh yeah, and it just wasn't a problem.
Earlier you mentioned that the Casey, is that
Casey,
right?
Casey.
Took Sacred Heart tunes and put more suitable lyrics for primitive Baptist churches.
Yes.
Well, I mean, today, many of our Sacred Heart singings are in primitive Baptist churches, so will you describe what you mean about that earlier time?
Okay, I'll pick a song. Passing Away. Okay, you know the song. Passing away, we are passing away, we are passing away to the great judgment day. They don't play that.
Okay.
Rising day.
Oh, so they just tickle it a little.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe. Okay. Hosanna. Hosanna, that second verse of Hosanna. They changed the words there. Actually, we did, Mike did the actual studying of this about what they're talking about there, and I guess I don't think there's any conflict there if you realize what the guy had in mind when he wrote the lyrics. But if you, what is, read the second verse, 2:14, what I just drink water about the growth.
So,
And I want you to talk about sugar and blackberry. And I'm looking at your cheat sheet over
Well,
here, and I see
sugar was
and
rationed.
blackberries.
Sugar was rationed. You couldn't buy sugar.
Okay.
And what blackberries has to do with it is, we would take back blackberries and can them. But you wouldn't put sugar in them until you took them down to eat. Because sometimes canned blackberries spoil. And you wouldn't put that sugar in there because you didn't want to lose that sugar.
So you want 2:14?
saved by the merit of his Lord, glory
Okay.
and praise.
Okay, no, that's not, keep going.
Glory and praise to Christ he gives, yet still his merciful reward according to his works.
According to his word. Okay. That's not what Primitive Baptists believe.
No,
But now, the portion was written about somebody that died, and they were talking about him. But anyway, and you can argue that this is consistent with what Paul said, but that in the good old songs, they changed that a little bit. So,
Why are we singing in primitive Baptist churches today with the Sacred Heart? Because their theology.
now, I will give you something really strange.
They're not as hard as Casey was.
Well, I've been at a lot of singings when we sing with Hugh Bill, and we'd sing someone, he'd come, lean over and he'd sing just loud as anybody, but he'd lean over after the song said, not exactly consistent with the scripture is. But my mother said that there was a brief time in Macedonia when the Christian harmony was the church hymn. Okay, between, I guess that would have been between Lloyd's and the good old song. Good old song came out in 2013.
And it had passing away in
Right?
it? And it had passing away? Yeah.
I'm just telling you what she said. I wasn't there, but for a while, you know, books were scarce.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, what are you going to
You
do?
wouldn't have sung it.
You know, they had been singing out of a words only book, and so they chose a book with tunes. And then when the good old songs came out, they adopted the good old songs. So where was it? Y'all not singing yet?
Can I give another answer to Martha's question?
Pardon?
Can I give another answer to
Sure.
Martha's question?
Yeah.
But I think also one reason we sing in a lot of primitive Baptist churches is because of the circuit riding preacher. And if a church had services on the first Sunday of the month, then that meant it was available second, third, and fourth.
yeah.
And there are theological similarities with primitive Baptists, as with most any Protestant denomination with the songs in Sacred Heart and Christian Harmony and such. But I think it was basically a practical availability of space issue.
I certainly agree with that. Sure, that's right. But I think there was another factor, and that was the good old song. And it was the primitive Baptists that knew this music. And so they were sympathetic to having these songs on there.
I was gonna say, and two, in a lot of cases is, there's no longer services in these primitive Baptist churches, and the community wants to see the building used, and,
But even in the fifties, forties and fifties, a lot of these things were in primitive Baptist churches, and I think God, they're on the best. But I want to go back and talk about this Doshi Ernest. I had planned to say this, but she played the piano. Sweet old lady. You had to love this Doshi. Now you just, I'm sorry, you just can't tell her that she can't play the piano. And so we go to North Mississippi and they play the piano. It's like art music. It doesn't help. Doesn't help. But other people play the piano. My good friend Jimmy Ruth. Jimmy Ruth was my age. Jimmy Ruth Hawkins. Her dad was S.T. Hawkins. Just another parent to me if I had needed it. If my parents had died and I needed a place to go, I would not have hesitated to go stay with S.T. and Cleo. They would have treated me just like a son. I mean, I know that. But Jimmy Ruth was their daughter about my age, and she played the piano. And she was very good. Outstanding. And she was a shake note musician. She played the piano that way. Okay. I think this is really cool. If somebody called her to play, she'd be, and they'd pick the number. And she'd look at the leader. And the leader's going to do one of two things. Either he's going to pitch it, or he's going to signal for her to pitch it. If he signaled to her, she played it where it was written. If he pitched it, she played it where he pitched it. Wow. She was a shake note piano player. My brother.
She played six flats if she had to.
She played whatever he said. And not only that, and I've told this, and people have just said this is not true, and I'm sorry, this is true. You know, we were talking about when the pitch sort of shifts. Jimmy Ruth would shift with it. We play along a while, and she notices that she would change the key a little bit. And she would do this. I have heard her do this. You would get on a song, an upbeat song, and they tend to go higher.
Yeah.
Well, when we start, she's playing the same as we're singing. When we end, she's playing what we're singing. But even though she's very good, it did not I have some recordings from that period, and I'm glad I do, because I think people don't really believe me when I tell them the way it really was. But Miss Doshi, in particular, I won't get off Miss Doshi, but I mean, you had to love her. I love Miss Doshi. But, she loved that 282. Okay. And she's playing that, you had to do it her way. Not the Christian Heart, the Sacred Heart.
Oh.
And I don't care to stay here alone. That just drive me crazy. She hit that throat and she just couldn't run loose. And that's the way the piano's going to go. And you just have to get used to it.
Oh, so she wouldn't syncopate it there?
What?
She wouldn't do the syncopation there?
And I don't care.
Oh, good God.
She loved that. She's going to hang on to it. We have also a recording of that, and I think it was Miss Doshi playing. Benny Rigdon and I was rather fractious youngster. And Benny, let's say Benny was more confident than I was. So when we got up to lead a song, we'll do it our way. We set the tempo. We left liberty. And the piano player couldn't keep up. Well, typically what you do is you give in to the piano. I have a recording of this, and you don't want to hear it. She'd play along a while, and she'd behind, and she'd quit, and then she would get back. Piano does not make you better. See, I had some other. I think I don't really remember. Yeah, Michael was talking about the tempo, and The singings were taken more seriously.
Mm-hmm.
The arrangement of the singing was taken more seriously. Now we sort of casually pick somebody to be the arranging committee. Not so much then. It was a three-person arranging committee, and they thought about things like the order that you call leaders. And there would always be somebody that wanted to sing slow. And then you had people that wanted to be more upbeat, and they would argue about the order that you call leaders. And they would get intense at times. But they took that component of the singing more seriously than we do now.
So, bringing up the tempo, would they intersperse the slow singers with the ones that?
It was a matter of the time of the day. Now,
Ah.
Mr. Thorne, he thought you ought to go back and forth. You come in after lunch, you can sing a fast song, but then you ought to let one of these slow singers sing. And my dad thought that would kill the singing. Right after lunch, for example, you were talking about right after lunch, you come back with energy. And then when you're winding down, and you want to sing slow songs, then that's when they disagree about that. So that was different. And another thing the committee did, we sang Easter anthem every sing.
You sang, what'd you say?
We sang Easter anthem at every sing.
Oh, at every sing.
Yeah.
If you got over around 2 o'clock in the afternoon time, then we'd sort of take a break now. If no one had sung Easter anthem, then that three-person arranging committee would choose somebody to lead Easter anthem. Now, that's not your song, you still get your turn to lead, but you are assigned Easter anthem. That was the culture. We always sang Easter anthem. And I thought that was a good thing. I didn't ever hear too much of that.
So you closed the hour after dinner with Easter anthem every time?
No.
If it hadn't been called by
If
then.
it hadn't been called?
No, I shouldn't say this, but there ain't nothing that we always did. I mean, singing Easter anthem was about as regular as anything.
Right.
But when we sang it, no, the arranging committee took care of it. We sang it whenever they said to. But if you got up and called for Easter anthem, that was fine, whenever you want to sing it. But if you hadn't sung it, after a while, and they thought we ought to do this, then they would call us.
And don't they still do that in certain parts of Mississippi?
Yeah, yeah, you go to the, you got the convention, we're gonna sing Easter.
Oh, yeah.
Other comments?
What about the use of the drone as a closer? Was that when you were growing up?
My Uncle Millage was the same age as my dad. Uncle Millage was my mother's brother. He was born in 1894 too, and I have heard him say on several occasions that this ain't broke down nowhere. He didn't know that it was in print, but I learned this from my father. We've been singing this all my life. So that's about all I know. Some, when I hold my hand up, some sing, some don't. You give instructions about that. And so that's about all I know about it. We sang it, of course, all the time since I was young, but not only that, they had sung it since he was young. 1900. So. But it was never used in any way except as a closing song. And if, I don't want to say it was always, we always closed the convention. Like I said, there's nothing that we always did. But, yeah, we closed the convention. Now, the other singings, sometimes we sing, sometimes we wouldn't. But most of the time, we closed the convention with the drum. And I still do. Comments? What do you want to sing, Mom?
What do you want to sing?
Easter anthem.
Yeah.
It's effort too.
Yeah, that's really good.
How about singing, how about singing something that your dad liked to sing, John? What did your dad like? What was his
He did not lead.
Oh, right.
He was a bass singer and he never led. In this book, I guess two of his favorite songs surely would have been Easter Anthem and David's Lamentation. But then after Decent Parish book came out, he liked that 131. Parish song.
Why don't we sing 131?
All right. In the Sacred Heart, my dad died in April the 30th, 1964. That was a long time. I can still hear him sing Bounce of Pain. He was a good bass singer. I can still hear that.
Are you gonna lead it?
No,
You want me to lead it?
yes,
What kind of tempo would your dad have wanted to do that?
I didn't want to drag it.
Don't worry, we won't.
Song is, that's it. I have the original printing of that song, which is in a little book, from 1946. And what is now trio in this book was a duet, with just the alto and the bass in the original song. And he added that to this book.
I wouldn't say that's what Little Book singing is like. That would have been one of the really good Little Book songs.
John, what was that song that you led at the Christian Harmony Convention? I think you led it several times. It's about it's a child saying that I have no father now, my father's gone away. What is that?
Alone.
261 on the bottom.
261. You wanna sing that?
Okay.
261 on the bottom.
Yeah, this is what I was saying, that Benny loved this song. And so we sang it a good many times before I did also.
Actually, it's a J.L. White book song. T.W. Lofton was a colleague of J.L. White.
But he's got,
It's in the Cooper book, but
and he wrote altos for
Right.
Cooper.
he wrote some Cooper altos, but
Yeah, this-
Lofton was a
The
colleague.
J.L. White book is where this came from. We used to sing it up in Calhoun County. And so Benny, I'm sure Benny is the one that got Mr. Deason to put this in here, from the J.L. White book. That's where we learned it.
No, mi, do, so.
No, we're not going to lead this as fast as he told us to this morning.
No.
I said work here
Pardon?
44 years ago today is when my mother passed away, and this was one of her favorite songs.
No,